Well, let's return to Syria now, because the Syrian opposition groups say they've reached a deal on forming a new unified leadership to fight the regime of Bashar al-Assad. The new coalition of groups from inside and outside Syria will be led by Muaz Al-Khatib, a moderate Islamist cleric who fled Syria earlier this year. Today, Israel's military says it fired warning shots into Syria after stray mortar rounds hit one of its bases inside the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Syria's southern border. Let's speak to the journalist and Syria analyst Saka Al-Makhadhi. And if we could just start with the shell fired by Israel into the Golan Heights today. Is this just what it is on face value, or potentially something a bit more serious?
Well, you know, I think Israel is desperate to keep this border quiet. They've occupied the Golan Heights for more than 40 years now. It's been a very quiet border. The regime of Bashar al-Assad and his father, Hafez al-Assad, kept that border absolutely silent for that entire period. Israel is determined to keep it that way. I think Syria, though, would be desperate for something to flare up there to distract international attention from what's going on in Syria, and possibly to gather Syrians around the falling regime of Bashar al-Assad.
But what we're seeing on this particular border, is it similar to what we see on the Turkish border as well, where these skirmishes sometimes just penetrate the sovereignty of a neighbouring country?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to remember here that this is occupied territory, and there has been a long conflict between these two states. Syria has been kind of prodding at this border for a while. A year ago, they allowed, some people say, enticed Palestinian refugees inside Syria to cross the border, to breach the border and enter the occupied Golan Heights, and in a kind of provocation to Israel. Israel didn't respond in any way against the Syrian state, although some of those people crossing were killed at that time. So it is desperate. It has been kind of prodding Israel for a while now.
Let's turn to Qatar, because the opposition in Syria, fragmented right the way through. Are we seeing now a sort of meeting of minds? Has something brought all these disparate groups together? And is the whole of Syria represented by these groups?
Well, you know, something needed to happen. After America, which was one of the biggest backers of the Syrian National Council, the former biggest umbrella group, after they signed the SNC down the stream, there had to be some kind of new opposition grouping. And I think that, you know, this is an attempt to reinvigorate the external opposition groupings. The new leader, who's just been elected, Muaz Al-Khatib, has connections on the ground. He's a very popular leader inside Syria. He was a cleric at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, and has connections on the ground, unlike many of the former SNC leaders. So I think what we're going to see now is a pressure on them to kind of deliver to the Syrian people what they've been demanding, whether that's arms or money or some kind of international intervention.
And will this sort of circumvent the opposition of Russia and China when it comes to criticising the regime of Bashar al-Assad?
Russia and China have sided with Bashar al-Assad and have backed him to the hilt, and I don't think anything's going to push them away from that support. The point of this new national coalition is to get Western support on board and to face the West. That's the direction they're facing. They're not concentrating on Russia and China, and that's the future for the opposition.
And just very briefly, I mean, Bashar al-Assad's been on a foreign TV station again today, or in the last few hours, saying that he's not going to leave. I mean, there's no negotiated exit from the country as far as Bashar al-Assad is concerned.
No, he's kind of signed up to the Gaddafi option now, saying that he's going to live and die in Syria. And I think really that should focus the mind on the fact that there isn't going to be a negotiated transition, there aren't going to be talks between the regime and the opposition, and that he's going to continue this fight until he's forced from power.
OK, Saka Al-Makhadhi, thank you very much indeed for coming in. 24 minutes past 8. This is